Okay, you're going to do this with the stick. Talk less about the stick.
Okay.
And then when you do it, I'm going to move the stick out.
All right. We're starting over. Howdy there, guys. Welcome back as we continue our journey through the first 5 yellow belt techniques and examining how the high neutral bow changes things. Flat out changes it. I asked Professor Cole, I don't know, a month ago, how does what we call funky stance, or now the high neutral bow, change what we teach? And these are some of the insights in which we've gleaned from that examination. So right now we're going to be looking at sword of destruction and how, number one, I was initially taught it, and now how the high neutral bow changes it. With that, I'll have Professor Cole back up a little bit. You guys are going to see a stick on the ground. We'll talk about that in a minute. But as I was initially taught this some years ago, is stepping right naturally, extended outward block. Notice my depth of action. My arm's not straight. My arm's not at my face. I'm framing. As I do so, heel comes down, rotate, kick, chop along line 3. Now, how does the high neutral bow change this? Well, I think it emphasizes even more the directional change from what we call my line 1, 12 to 6, to the stick, which is our line 3. Line 3 of the universal pattern goes from 1:30 to 7:30 on the clock. My line 1 is 12 to 6. So in other words, I'm actually going to be getting closer to my opponent by going around using almost an up-clock motion with my footstep. I'm going to shift weight. I'm going to step back along line 3. But notice, I'm not going to put my heel down. Instead, I'm going to double factor. I'm going to rotate. Notice this checking hand comes forward. Then as we need to formulate this, I'm going to drag and chop, presenting my okole and my heel towards my opponent. Professor Cole is going to move the stick as we talk about this. And for some of you that have more vocabulary of motion in the American Kenpo system, this might look a whole heck of a lot like unfurling crane, or cross of destruction, or twist of fate. As Professor Cole comes up, first we're going to gauge arm. In other words, as Professor Cole comes up, if I do not move, this is going to send me to la-la land. Also notice the catalyst of Professor Cole. He's taking it from basically what we call pre-position 2, left foot slightly forward. He's not stepping back in a neutral bow and step through forward with this. It's going to be basically a boxer's step in and hook. Notice also the method by which he's going to use it. It's going to be a vertical roundhouse.
Now this is important because when we eventually get the 5 swords, you're going to understand why it's a roundhouse punch and not a hook punch.
We will define the difference because I believe firmly that both in postmodern Kenpo and in Christian Kenpo, every technique has a different attack, a different catalyst and response for every one of the 154. So we need to distinguish between the method, the clock position, and the intent of our opponent. With that, as I'm here, I'm going to pre-position myself. My right foot's going to be slightly forward. As Mr. Cole comes in, I'm going to step, rotate. Notice where my hands land. I'm going to continue to rotate to bring him in. I'm going to continue on line 3, going in at him on this 45-degree. Basically, I'm dissecting his shoulder. From point of origin, I go to point of contact. And if he's still there, notice my heel comes up, my hip points to the level of the target. I'm going to be nice and kick the knee.
Crossing right to left, not right to right, not right to left.
Yeah, not crossing the body. I want to kick out the same side. Once again, slowly, as he comes in. If I don't get out of the way, this is going to be nine-nights. Notice, brought him closer to me. I'm going to step in and chop.
Don't worry, we did that.
Yeah,
We apologize at the beginning and at the end, trust me.
yeah, we're all good. Plenty of years of beating on each other. And yeah. Also, something that is introduced, especially with the high neutral bow, is something called the twisted bow. So for instance, if I step back, and I step back to my left, or excuse me, my right high neutral bow, as I use that extended outward block, I'm going to use body fusion and the sinking of my height and modifying my width to rotate, which brings frictional pull into his arm that then allows me to unwind into that chop and present my heel and my hip towards the line of the attack. Once again, this is a twisted bow. I don't need to put my back heel down. I do not need to put my back heel down. You may be saying that's Kenpo heresy, but there's a reason we have a twisted bow. Not only to introduce things such as frictional pull, but also to create power, torque, and rotation in the technique. Exactly the same thing we do in unfurling crane. But we don't question that it's there. And yet when we mention something like a twisted bow, something people call you crazy. Comments, Professor Cole?
Okay, what we're doing is we're actually talking about short form 2, steps 3 and 4. Predominantly, and this speaks a little bit towards long form 2 also, but predominantly in step 3, I was taught vertical block to frame, punch downward, but it's not a forward bow. It's not a bracing or a fighting forward bow. If you're doing it in competition, I can see why you would go to a forward bow, because it shows power, okay? And especially in long 2, going to the forward bow shows power. But predominantly, this is a twisted bow. See that we're framing here, but we're punching down and in. So the same thing is going on here. From here, I'm twisted. I'm not going to the forward bow, and then I'm able to then heel up, heel down, which is one of our sayings, and then that puts my knee. And this is great, on the outside of the attacker, and so that my foot is presented rather than the ball of my foot. Associate Professor Chris over here, about 11 years ago, was really good at the slicing kick, which you will find in Twist of Fate.
Yes.
Twist of Fate. You'll find that it's important that you kick through in that slicing. It's called slice kick in American Kenpo. But it took him a long time working on kick set 1, line 1, for him to understand that there is a better kick. So when my knee is here on the outside of Chris, that's a side kick. When my knee is here, that's a slicing kick or a toe kick. Oh, but there's a ball peen kick. There's a third. We call it a ball peen. And he's going to show it to you right now. Get left. Go. I learned that by watching Shotokan people, black belts, just go do that kick to the head. I mean, they were just right, left, just marching across about 25 feet, 30 feet. And I was so impressed. I'm like, what do we call that? Because all that thing does is just, the chamber is in the kick. Mm-hmm. And so the chamber is in the transition. So I wanted to show you the ball peen. Because when you're here and you rearrange this whole thing, the chamber of the kick is in the transition, not the drag up to the transition to the kick, 1, 2, 3, 4, up, out, back, and down. Cheat like it's your life is on the line. 1, 2, transition to the chamber, 3. That's what we're showing you. This is a lesson, one of 154, sometimes multiple lessons within each pattern.
And that's why we're changing our vocabulary from technique or pattern to, we have 154 lessons plus the 96 lessons, so 250 lessons in the postmodern Kenpo system. And sometimes, as Professor Cole said, there's multiple lessons per technique. It's not a bunch of disconnected islands, that they are in fact a chain of islands with relations to each other. The same thing with the 57 techniques in the Christian Kenpo system. They're not islands unto themselves. They each have lessons that build upon one another, as we've already looked at in the previous video, with alternating maces and long form 1. They're not disconnected. They borrow the same lessons. They reinforce the same lessons.
When it comes to the word lessons, I'm just going to be short with this. As Chris started, when he became a white belt again, and then worked his way back up to first degree black, good on you. Every time I gave him a packet of information, specifically about the patterns, the lessons, there were my lessons printed at the base of at the bottom of the margin. Now, we found out after about purple belt and blue belt, right around purple blue, that Chris moves differently than I do. The same pattern will look a little different, but it will accomplish the same thing. If that is not tailoring, he's tailoring to himself. See, this is the description, and in here might be pen writing, it might be printed, whatever. But my lessons started here. He wrote his own lessons afterwards, and he's going to pass that on to his students. I've already internalized and assimilated my lessons, okay? So there are, I remember when Pat was teaching me, I remember this, this, and this, okay? When Dave talked about kinetic linking and striking through, I then added that up here into my vocabulary. I didn't put it on paper, but I shared it with him. So if I do the precursor technique snapping twig, and I come here and I chop, you see that arm? That's part of the lesson, and then I return, okay? I do it like this way, and I show it this way. I step back, I hyperextend, that's the under aspect. Then I come to here, and I anchor my elbow. He's not going to headbutt me. He's certainly not going to headbutt me, because I'm going to pop him right here, and then I'm going to come to here, and I'm basically just boxing with him. Ooh, boxing is really cool. One more time. And I want to do the other one, but we're not going to do it. So I step back, naturally, to the high neutral, and then I rotate. It's transitory, but it's a slow transitory, because I'm going to pop this down into here, pop. I hit him in the shoulder. Now I've got a hold of his hand. I can wonderfully come in here and do all kinds of fun things with it. I can call this a mercy shot. I wouldn't hit him in the neck if I'm going to do a mercy shot. I'm going to hit him right there in the shoulder to make sure that his mass does not move forward, because if he decides to move forward and throw a punch, then I just simply, and my mercy point is actually a mercy choice, which is a new thing, where I decide to control him rather than try to fight him out of the situation.
Thank you for
Enough said?
Enough said. Well, this was taking a short look at sword of destruction and the use of a twisted bow and how the high neutral bow affects what we do and how we do it. Hopefully for the benefit of others down the line. Hopefully for the refining of our motion. As I really think, and this is a Chris thing here, that Mr. Parker, yes, I name dropped, that Mr. Parker didn't want his art to remain traditional. He didn't want it to be like the Okinawan and Japanese systems that are ingrained and there's only one way to do things. I think if he would have lived longer, would have come to some of these conclusions himself.
Or already had and did not put it down on paper. He might have told somebody else, but we're doing our own thing.
And so we're continuing that effort of not examining what there is in tradition, but examining what there is to create. That there's a life and a spice in creation, in whether it's not only just naming things, but examining the motion and seeing how things react. Playing martial scientist with the system. Isn't that kind of the whole point of the definitions of rank from associate professor and up? is being the mad scientists with Kenpo? I think so. With that, for Professor Cole and myself, catch you guys later.
That was really, really good. I know I talked a lot that